Somewhere in what will one day be called North Dakota, the morning is wrong. The light has a color that doesn't belong to any season. Not dawn, not dusk. Something in between, smeared across the whole sky. A duck-billed dinosaur lowers its head and pulls at the ferns by the water, the way it did yesterday, the way it did every day of its life. It chews. It doesn't look up. Why would it? It has no idea. The world it was born into has already ended. It just hasn't finished dying yet. The asteroid hit. But that's not how they died. Here's the part almost everyone gets wrong. We picture it like a movie. A fireball. The ground splitting open. Every dinosaur on Earth dropping in the same terrible instant. And for the animals near the Yucatan, sure, it was exactly that fast. But Earth is enormous. A creature grazing in what is now Europe or Asia or deep in the southern continents was thousands of kilometers from the strike. The shockwave, the earthquake, the tsunami, those were regional, brutal but local. If you were a dinosaur in Mongolia that morning, you felt the ground tremble and then you went back to your day. The asteroid itself was about 10 to 15 kilometers across. When it struck, it carved a crater roughly 180 kilometers wide and released energy on the order of 100 trillion tons of TNT. That's a number you can't actually hold in your head, so let me put it another way. It was over 1 billion times the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. I've read that figure a dozen times, and it still doesn't sit right in my chest. And yet, most dinosaurs survived that day. What killed them wasn't fire, it was darkness. The rock the asteroid hit mattered as much as the asteroid. The Yucatan sat on a thick slab of sediment loaded with sulfur and carbonate. When that vaporized, it threw an obscene amount of sulfur into the upper atmosphere, where it formed tiny droplets of sulfuric acid. Add the soot from forests burning across the planet. Add pulverized rock dust. Now layer all of that across the entire sky. The sun didn't go out. It got strangled. Light at the surface dropped below the level plants need for photosynthesis, and according to climate simulations published in 2020, that twilight lasted well over 1.5 years in many regions. The climate model, led by Julia Brugger in 2017, found global cooling of up to 26 degrees Celsius in the first year. Ocean surface temperatures, measured from chemical signatures in the rock, dropped around 7 degrees. Picture a day that never gets brighter than heavy dusk. For months. The rain, when it comes, is acidic. The air has the cold of a winter that refuses to leave. This is the impact winter. And this, not the explosion, is the thing that emptied the world. Plants died first, and that changed everything. A food web is a tower, and it collapses from the bottom. When photosynthesis stops, the green things go first. The plankton in the sea, the ferns, and the leaves on land. Within weeks, the base of everything is rotting. Then the insects and the small grazers that depended on living plants. Then the big herbivores, Edmontosaurus, Triceratops. Animals built to process tons of vegetation a day, suddenly standing in a forest of dead sticks. And here's the cruel part. Body size decided the order of death. A huge animal can live off its own reserves longer. It can scavenge a carcass that a smaller animal already abandoned. So the giants didn't get saved by being giants. They got delayed. The biggest predators, the tyrannosaurs, likely held on a little longer simply because there were still bodies to feed on. For a while. Some of them survived long enough to watch everything they hunted disappear. But not everywhere died at the same speed. This is the part that haunts me, honestly. Because extinction isn't a single moment. It's a fade, and fades are uneven. There were pockets, refuges, a river valley where the water still held a little life, because aquatic systems that fed on dead organic matter didn't crash as fast as the sunlit ones. A sheltered floodplain, maybe an isolated population somewhere in the southern hemisphere, far from the worst of it. The fossil record even has a name for this messiness. Lazarus taxa, species that vanish from the rock, then reappear higher up, as if they came back from the dead. They didn't, of course. They were always there. We just couldn't see them. It's a reminder that the record is full of holes, and absence in the rock is not the same as absence on Earth. In the Hell Creek rocks of the American West, there's a strange detail. Dinosaur remains have been found above the iridium layer, the chemical fingerprint of the impact, by about 1.33 meters, which works out to perhaps 40,000 years later. Now, some researchers argue those bones were simply washed up out of older ground and redeposited. The debate is real, and it's not settled, but the image is hard to shake. Somewhere on Earth, a dinosaur was still alive, long after the world had already ended. So why did anything make it through? Look at who survived, and a pattern shows up. Birds. And remember, birds are dinosaurs, the only branch that's still here. The ones that lived tended to be small, and crucially, some had beaks instead of teeth. A beak can crack a seed, and seeds sit in the soil for years, waiting, a buried pantry that outlasts the dead forest above it. Crocodiles and their relatives pulled through too. A cold-blooded body burns very little fuel and can go a long time without a meal. Water buffered them from the worst of it. Turtles, the same story, slow and patient and cheap to run. And the mammals, small, often living in burrows, already adapted to the dark, eating insects and scraps, able to dig down and wait. As one researcher put it, even if a giant plant-eater had survived the strike, there would have been nothing for it to eat. The little scavengers didn't have that problem. So it wasn't strength, it wasn't intelligence. None of these animals were preparing for an apocalypse. They just happened to carry the exact traits the apocalypse demanded. It wasn't survival of the fittest, it was survival of the accidentally prepared. So how long did the whole thing actually take? And here I have to be honest with you, the way the science is honest. The fossil record cannot give you a date. It can't tell you the year the last big dinosaur fell. The rock simply isn't that precise. What we do have is a frame. The impact is dated to 66.043 million years ago, with an uncertainty of just 11,000 years. That's the work of Paul Wren and his team, published in Science in 2013. And the same research places the mass extinction within about 32,000 years of that moment. Sit with that number, not one terrible afternoon, not 1,000,000 slow years, something in between, a span that, on the geologic clock, is almost nothing, but in lived experience was generation after generation of animals being born into a dimmer, colder, emptier world than their parents knew. If you want to follow what came next, the part where small, shivering mammals crept into every empty space those dinosaurs left behind and eventually became us, subscribe. That story starts the moment this one ends. So let's go back to that duck-billed dinosaur in the strange morning light, the one we started with. I told you it didn't know the world had ended. But now I want to change the picture slightly. What if that wasn't the morning after the impact at all? What if it was a morning a year later? 2 years. The sky still gray. The ferns thinner now. The herd around it smaller than it used to be. A few stragglers where there were once hundreds. That's the truth we almost never tell. The end of the dinosaurs wasn't a bang. It was a silence that kept getting quieter. The last one didn't die in fire. It died of hunger, of cold, of being the final member of a kind in a world that no longer had room for it. We don't know the day, we don't know the place, but somewhere, at some quiet moment, the last non-avian dinosaur took its last breath, and the world moved on.